The name that shouldn't exist for 23 years. Every Sunday morning, exactly one new name appeared. Not painted, not engraved by hand, not carved overnight by vandals. Perfectly cut. Every letter identical, every line flawlessly aligned, as though the black granite monument had been waiting for that name all along. Nobody ever saw who did it. Nobody ever heard machinery. Nobody ever found footprints. Yet every Sunday, there was always one more name. The memorial stood deep inside Ashcroft Cemetery, a forgotten cemetery on the outskirts of Hollow Creek. It hadn't accepted a burial in nearly 40 years. Most of the headstones leaned at odd angles. Weather had erased many of the names. The iron gate had rusted shut long ago. Locals rarely came here anymore. Children avoided it completely, not because they believed it was haunted, because their parents always told them the same thing. Don't stay after sunrise on Sunday. Nobody explained why. They simply never questioned it. Emma Carter had never believed in local legends. At 38 years old, she had spent nearly 2 decades exposing fraud, corruption, and manufactured myths. As an investigative journalist, she trusted documents, witnesses, evidence, not ghost stories, especially not ones involving abandoned cemeteries. So when an anonymous envelope arrived at her office with no return address, she almost threw it away. Inside, there was only a single photograph, a weathered black granite memorial, hundreds of names, one circled in red ink. The note attached contained exactly 7 words. Next Sunday, watch the stone, not the gate, nothing else. No signature, no explanation. Emma almost ignored it until she turned the photograph over. On the back, someone had written today's date. Not next Sunday's, today's. She frowned. The envelope had been delivered less than an hour earlier. Whoever sent it expected her to arrive before something changed. Ashcroft Cemetery looked exactly as the photograph suggested. Quiet, forgotten, almost swallowed by the surrounding forest. The county had already approved demolition. Within 2 weeks, everything would be cleared to make room for a new bypass road. Emma parked outside the broken entrance. The chains hanging from the gate had long since snapped. She walked alone, camera over one shoulder, voice recorder in her pocket, notebook in hand. The deeper she entered the cemetery, the quieter the world became. Even the birds seemed to disappear. Then she saw it. The memorial, nearly 8 feet tall, polished black granite standing in the middle of neglected graves. Unlike everything around it, the stone looked almost new. No cracks, no moss, no weather damage, only hundreds of neatly engraved names. No birthdays, no death dates, only names, alphabetical, nothing more. Emma began photographing each section. Then something caught her attention. The names weren't random. She recognized several: a retired judge, a local physician, a former police captain, 2 city council members, all deceased, all from different years, different causes, different families. No obvious connection. She circled the monument one more time. No fresh stone dust, no tool marks, no signs of recent work. It was as though the newest name had always existed. She checked her watch. 8:42 a.m. Sunday. Nothing happened. The cemetery remained silent. She almost laughed at herself. Maybe the anonymous letter had been a prank after all. She packed away her notebook, turned toward the gate. Then, a car engine echoed outside the cemetery. An elderly man stepped through the entrance carrying a bouquet of white daisies. He noticed Emma immediately. "You came." Emma frowned. "Were you expecting me?" The old man nodded toward the photograph still sticking out of her notebook. "So, you received one too?" Before Emma could ask another question, the old man looked toward the black memorial. His smile disappeared. Very quietly, he whispered, "We're too late." Emma turned. The monument hadn't moved. No one stood near it. Nothing seemed different, until her eyes reached the very bottom row. There, beneath every other name, a single line of freshly carved letters reflected the morning sunlight. David Carter, Emma's father, who had called her less than 30 minutes earlier. The last name. Emma didn't move. She simply stared at the bottom of the monument. David Carter. The letters were flawless, sharp, clean, as though they had been carved years ago, yet she knew with absolute certainty that name hadn't been there 5 minutes earlier. She had photographed the entire monument, every section, every row. David Carter wasn't on it. Her first instinct wasn't fear, it was denial. She pulled the camera from her shoulder, hands shaking only slightly, scrolling backward through the images. The first photograph, no David Carter. Second, nothing. Third, still nothing. Then, the final image, taken less than 30 seconds earlier. There it was, exactly where it stood now, perfectly engraved, as though reality itself had quietly rewritten the photograph. Emma stared at the screen. She hadn't taken another picture. She hadn't looked away long enough. Yet somehow, the camera insisted the name had always been there. The elderly man never looked surprised. He simply placed his bouquet at the base of the monument. "You've seen it before," Emma whispered. He nodded. "Too many times." "How?" "I don't know. You watched it happen?" "It always happens while no one is looking." Emma frowned. "That's impossible." The old man smiled sadly. "I've spent 23 years trying to prove exactly that." Emma stepped closer to the stone. Her fingertips hovered over her father's name. The cut was smooth, fresh. Yet there was no stone dust, no smell of machinery, no rough edges, nothing. It felt as though the granite had been manufactured with the name already inside it. "My name is Walter Grayson." The old man extended his hand. Emma shook it automatically. "You've been coming here for 23 years? Every Sunday. Why?" Walter looked toward the surrounding graves. "Because I lost someone." Emma waited. "My wife." He pointed halfway up the monument. "Helen Grayson." Emma found the name almost immediately. "When was she buried?" Walter looked away. "She wasn't." Emma blinked. "What?" "We never found her body." The words settled heavily between them. Emma looked again at Helen Grayson's name. No dates, no explanation, just another entry among hundreds. "She disappeared?" Walter nodded. 19 months after her name appeared. Emma frowned. "So the monument doesn't predict death." Walter's expression became unreadable. "It predicts disappearance." Emma immediately pulled out her notebook. That changed everything. Deaths could be verified. Disappearances left uncertainty. She circled David Carter's name several times. "When did your wife's name appear?" Walter answered without hesitation. "April 7th, 1999. And she disappeared?" "November. Same year." Emma made another note. 7 months. She looked back at the monument. How many others had vanished instead of dying? Nobody had ever asked that question, because everyone assumed the names belonged to the dead. Her phone vibrated. "Dad," the screen displayed. Emma answered immediately. "You okay?" David Carter laughed softly. "Shouldn't I be asking you that?" His voice sounded normal, relaxed. He was at home, probably reading the Sunday paper, just as he did every weekend. "Where are you? Home? You haven't gone anywhere today?" "No." A brief pause. "Emma, is something wrong?" She looked at the monument. "No. I'll come see you. Everything okay? She hesitated. "Want to make sure." David chuckled. "You sound like your mother." After hanging up, Emma realized something strange. Walter was staring at her. Not at the phone, at the time displayed on its screen. 9:03 a.m. Walter's face slowly lost all color. "What?" Emma asked. Walter whispered only 4 words. "It started earlier." "What started?" Instead of answering, Walter pointed toward the bottom of the monument. Emma followed his finger. Her heartbeat stopped. David Carter's name was no longer the last one. Another name had appeared beneath it. Smaller, newer, freshly carved. Emma Carter. For several long seconds, neither of them breathed. Then Walter whispered the sentence he had hoped he would never say again. "It's never added 2 names." The second name, Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Her own name. Emma Carter. Perfectly engraved beneath her father's. She hadn't looked away for more than 2 seconds. Yet the stone had changed again. No sound. No vibration. No flash of light. Nothing. Just another name. Walter stepped backward. His breathing became uneven. "I've never seen this." Emma didn't answer. She lifted the camera again. 1 photograph. 2. 3. Each image showed the same thing. David Carter. Emma Carter. The names appeared in every frame, exactly as though they had always been there. She quickly opened the oldest photograph she had taken that morning. The monument now displayed both names there as well. Emma frowned. "No." She enlarged the image, zoomed to the bottom. There they were. Her camera wasn't documenting changes. It was changing with them. She immediately switched to video mode. "If this happens again, I want it recorded." Walter gave a tired smile. "I've tried, for years." Emma looked at him. "What happened?" "I never caught it." "You mean you missed it?" Walter slowly shook his head. "No. I watched the monument for 14 straight hours once. It still changed. When I reviewed the recording, the new name had been there since the beginning." Emma felt a chill. Not because of the monument. Because Walter wasn't describing magic. He was describing evidence being rewritten. She walked around the granite memorial again. This time, she examined its foundation. No hidden panels, no mechanical seams, no electrical conduit. The monument rested on an old concrete base cracked with age. Nothing about it suggested modern technology. Yet, the precision of the lettering couldn't have been done by hand, not without specialized equipment that simply wasn't there. Her phone vibrated again. A text message. Unknown number. Only 1 sentence. "Don't go home." Emma stopped walking. Another message arrived immediately. "Watch your father." She looked around the cemetery. There was no one. Only Walter. The rows of abandoned graves, and the towering black monument. She typed back. "Who are you?" The reply came almost instantly. "I'm the reason you're still alive." Walter noticed the change in her expression. "What happened?" Emma showed him the messages. He read them once, then quietly handed the phone back. "I've received those too." Emma stared. "When?" Walter answered without hesitation. "The week before Helen disappeared." The wind suddenly picked up. Leaves swirled across the cemetery paths. Emma instinctively looked toward the entrance. A white utility truck had just stopped outside the broken gate. 2 men climbed out. County maintenance uniforms. One carried a clipboard. The other unlocked the temporary chain blocking the access road. Walter frowned. "They're early. Who are they?" "The demolition survey." Emma remembered. The county planned to clear Ashcroft Cemetery within 2 weeks. She hadn't expected anyone to arrive today. The younger worker approached politely. "Morning." Walter nodded. "Morning." The worker smiled at Emma. "Sorry to interrupt. We just need to confirm measurements before demolition." Emma immediately asked, "Has this monument been inspected before?" The man checked his clipboard. "Actually." He frowned. "That's strange." What? This monument isn't on the survey. Emma looked toward the granite. What do you mean? The worker flipped through several pages. Every grave, every fence, every tree, they're all listed. He looked back at the memorial. But according to the county records, there's never been a monument in the center of this cemetery. Silence. Emma slowly turned toward the massive slab of polished black granite, nearly 8 feet tall, visible from almost anywhere in the cemetery. Impossible to miss. Yet somehow, officially, it didn't exist. Before anyone could speak again, the older surveyor walked toward the monument. He adjusted his glasses, looked directly at the names, then suddenly froze. The clipboard slipped from his hands. His lips trembled. He whispered only one sentence. "My name isn't supposed to be there." Emma followed his gaze. Halfway up the monument, freshly engraved, as if carved only seconds ago, appeared the name Jonathan Reed. The older surveyor slowly backed away. His face had turned completely white. Then he whispered, "I never told anyone I was coming here today. The man who wasn't supposed to be here." Jonathan Reed didn't blink. He couldn't. His eyes remained fixed on the monument. His own name, perfectly carved among hundreds of others. He took another step backward, then another, as though distance alone might prove what he was seeing wasn't real. It wasn't there. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "I've walked past this monument before. It wasn't there." Emma immediately lifted her camera. "Mr. Reed, when was the last time you came here?" Jonathan swallowed. "Never." Emma frowned. "You just said you've walked past it." "I have." He looked genuinely confused. "I mean, I've driven past the cemetery. I've never come inside." Walter quietly interrupted. "You've never even been here before today." Jonathan stared at him. "How do you know that?" Walter didn't answer, because the question itself had revealed something impossible. Jonathan's memory had already begun contradicting itself. Emma walked closer. "Can I ask you something?" Jonathan nodded slowly. "Did anyone know you'd be assigned here today?" He answered immediately. "The schedule changed last night. My supervisor called around 9. No one else knew." Emma exchanged a quick glance with Walter. Her anonymous text echoed inside her mind. "Watch your father." Whoever had sent it had known far more than they should. The younger surveyor finally approached. "John," no response. "You okay?" Jonathan pointed silently toward the stone. The younger man leaned closer. "What am I looking?" His sentence stopped halfway. Emma watched the color drain from his face. "No," he whispered, then turned sharply toward Jonathan. "You told them?" Jonathan looked confused. "Told who?" "The county. The police. Someone. I didn't tell anyone." The younger man shook his head violently. "No, no one knows about my brother." Emma stepped forward. "What brother?" The younger surveyor hesitated, then slowly raised one trembling finger toward another section of the monument. Emma followed his hand. There, only a few rows above Jonathan Reed. She found another name, Michael Sullivan. The younger surveyor closed his eyes. "My brother. He disappeared 11 years ago." Emma looked back at him. "He's dead?" He opened his eyes. "We don't know." His voice cracked. "They never found him." Emma's notebook was already open. Helen Grayson, missing. Michael Sullivan, missing. Not dead. Missing. She drew a thick line beneath the word. This monument wasn't recording deaths. It was connected to disappearances. But why were living people suddenly appearing? Walter slowly walked around the granite base. "I've spent 23 years asking the wrong question." Emma looked up. "What do you mean?" I kept asking. "Who carves the names?" He rested one weathered hand against the cold stone. "But maybe that's not the mystery." Emma waited. Walter looked directly into Emma's eyes. The real question, who decides them? Silence settled over the cemetery. Even the wind had stopped. Emma's phone vibrated again. No number. This time, there was no text, only a photograph. She opened it. The image had clearly been taken from high above, a drone, or perhaps the roof of a nearby building. It showed Ashcroft Cemetery, the monument, Walter, Jonathan, the younger surveyor, and Emma herself, standing exactly where they were now. The timestamp read 9:11 a.m. Emma looked at the clock on her phone. 9:11 a.m. The picture had been taken at the exact same moment she was viewing it. She spun toward the surrounding woods. Nothing. No drone. No movement. Only trees. Another message appeared beneath the photograph. "You are looking at the wrong stone," Emma frowned. "Wrong stone?" She slowly lowered the phone. There was only one monument in the center of the cemetery. Unless, her eyes drifted to the cracked concrete beneath it. For the first time, she noticed something she had somehow overlooked all morning. The polished black monument wasn't attached to the old foundation. It was sitting, perfectly centered, on top of another, much older slab of granite, and along one exposed corner, barely visible beneath decades of dirt, was the edge of an inscription. Not names, not dates, just 3 words. "Do not remove." The stone beneath the stone. Emma knelt beside the monument. The exposed corner was barely wider than 2 fingers. Most people would have walked past it without noticing. 23 years of dirt, dead leaves, cracked roots. Everything had hidden it. She brushed the soil away carefully with the edge of her notebook. More letters slowly emerged. "Do not remove." The engraving wasn't modern. The edges had softened with age. Unlike the flawless names above, these words had been cut by hand. Long ago. Walter crouched beside her. "I've never seen that." Emma looked at him. "You've been here every Sunday." Walter nodded. "I always watched the names, never the foundation." Emma almost smiled. Whoever had built this place understood something about people. Everyone looked at the mystery. Nobody looked underneath it. Jonathan Reed stepped closer. "You think the monument was built over something?" Emma didn't answer immediately. Instead, she ran her fingers along the narrow gap between the polished granite and the older base. The space was only a few millimeters wide, just enough for rainwater to disappear inside. Too narrow to see through. Too precise to be accidental. It looked engineered. The younger surveyor crouched beside them. "My name's Eric Sullivan." Emma nodded. "You said your brother disappeared." Eric stared at the monument. 11 years ago. He worked for the county. What did he do? He was part of a survey crew. Emma froze. A survey crew? Eric nodded. They were mapping old public cemeteries. Walter slowly turned toward Emma. No one needed to say it. Ashcroft Cemetery had already appeared in another investigation. Emma quickly opened her notebook. Walter's wife disappeared. 1999. Eric's brother disappeared. 11 years ago. Both connected. Somehow. To this cemetery. She looked toward Jonathan. "What exactly are you surveying today?" Jonathan finally regained enough composure to answer. "The county wants to confirm underground stability for the new bypass, ground-penetrating radar." Emma looked at the white utility truck. "So, you have the equipment?" Jonathan nodded. "In the trailer." Emma's heartbeat quickened. Ground-penetrating radar. For the first time, they possessed something capable of seeing beneath the monument. 10 minutes later, the radar unit rolled slowly across the neglected cemetery. Eric guided the antenna. Jonathan monitored the screen. Emma watched every movement. Walter stood silently beside the black monument. The first scan passed beneath several old graves. Nothing unusual. Collapsed coffins, stone foundations, tree roots, exactly what the machine expected. Then, Eric pushed the antenna toward the monument. The display instantly erupted with interference. Static, distorted reflections, blank white bands. Jonathan frowned. That's impossible. He reset the system, scanned again. The same result. Not weak data, no data, as though the ground itself refused to be measured. Jonathan adjusted the frequency. Lower, then higher. Every other part of the cemetery produced clean readings. Only the monument remained invisible. Emma pointed toward the screen. What does that mean? Jonathan answered quietly. It means there's something under it. What kind of something? He shook his head. I don't know. I've never seen radar completely fail. It isn't reflecting. It isn't absorbing. He hesitated. It's as if the signal never reaches the ground. Silence settled over the group. Then Walter spoke. What if the monument isn't blocking the radar? Everyone looked at him. What if the radar is blocking us? Emma frowned. What do you mean? Walter stared at the polished granite. For 23 years, I assumed this monument was hiding something beneath it. He slowly shook his head. But maybe it was built to keep something from being found. At that exact moment, a deep metallic sound echoed beneath their feet. Clang. Not loud, not violent, just one hollow strike. Every head turned toward the monument. Nobody had touched it. The sound came again. Clang. This time, directly below the polished stone. Eric looked down at the radar screen. The interference was gone. For less than a second, a single image appeared. Not earth, not rock, not a burial chamber. It looked unmistakably like a perfectly rectangular steel door, buried nearly 20 feet beneath the monument. Then the screen went black again. Before anyone could react, Emma's phone vibrated one more time. A known number, only 6 words appeared on the display. Don't open it before Sunday ends. The warning. Nobody spoke. Emma read the message again. Don't open it before Sunday ends. Exactly 6 words. No signature, no explanation. Just another command from the same unknown sender who somehow knew where she was, what she was seeing, and what she was about to do. She looked at the time, 2:27 a.m. Sunday had barely begun. Jonathan lowered the radar controller. You received another one? Emma nodded. She handed him the phone. Jonathan read the message silently before giving it back. You know what bothers me? What? They didn't say, don't open it. Emma frowned. They said, he pointed at the screen, don't open it before Sunday ends. Walter immediately understood. So whoever sent this, expect someone to open it. Emma looked back toward the monument. 20 feet below. A steel door, hidden beneath an abandoned cemetery. A monument that officially didn't exist. Names that appeared without explanation. Anonymous warnings arriving before every discovery. Nothing about this investigation felt random anymore. Someone was guiding it. Carefully. Deliberately. One step at a time. Eric was still staring at the radar screen. I saved the scan. Jonathan looked surprised. You did? Eric nodded. The image only lasted a second, but the system records continuously. He opened the scan. History, frame by frame, static, interference. Then, there it was, the rectangular outline, perfect 90-degree corners, heavy steel, approximately 8 feet long, 4 feet wide, centered directly beneath the monument. Emma leaned closer. Can you estimate how old it is? Jonathan shook his head. Radar can't do that. But I can tell you one thing. He enlarged the image. The door wasn't installed after the cemetery. Emma frowned. What do you mean? The foundation of the monument was built around it. Walter slowly removed his glasses. So, the door came first. Emma nodded, and the monument was added later, to hide it. Or, she stopped herself. Maybe not to hide it. Maybe to mark it. The idea lingered in her mind. Every name, every Sunday, every disappearance. What if the monument wasn't a cover? What if it was a record? Jonathan's radio suddenly crackled. Survey Team 2, a distorted voice answered. Go ahead. Jonathan, where are you exactly? Ashcroft Cemetery. Silence. Then, who authorized that? Jonathan frowned. The county schedule. Another pause. We don't have Ashcroft Cemetery on today's schedule. Jonathan's expression hardened. What? Our assignment changed yesterday. We're supposed to be at Pine Ridge Memorial. Jonathan looked at Eric. Eric slowly shook his head. Oh, we both signed the paperwork. Jonathan's voice became tense. Hold on. He opened the folded work order inside his clipboard. Emma stepped beside him. The paper clearly read, Ashcroft Cemetery. Ground stability. Survey date. Today. Jonathan turned the page over. The county seal was genuine. The signatures looked authentic. Everything appeared normal. Until the ink began fading, right before their eyes. Not all at once. One letter at a time. Ashcroft slowly disappeared, replacing itself with new text. Pine Ridge Memorial. Jonathan dropped the clipboard. No. Eric picked it up. The document now matched exactly what the dispatcher had said. There was no trace that Ashcroft Cemetery had ever been printed there. Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. First the photographs, now official paperwork. Evidence wasn't simply disappearing. It was rewriting itself. Walter spoke almost to himself. It isn't changing history. Emma looked at him. What? It changes. Whatever can prove history happened. The words settled heavily over the group. Emma suddenly realized something. Every piece of evidence she had collected so far could disappear. Her photographs, her notes, the radar scan. Everything. Unless she stopped writing. Instead, she pulled a small digital voice recorder from her jacket. The battery indicator flashed green. She pressed record. My name is Emma Carter. Today is Sunday, October 12th. I'm standing in Ashcroft Cemetery with Walter Grayson, Jonathan Reed, and Eric Sullivan. Beneath the central monument, ground-penetrating radar detected a steel door approximately 20 feet underground. If this recording changes, she looked directly at the blinking red light. Then, whatever we're dealing with doesn't just alter evidence, it alters reality. She clipped the recorder back into her pocket. The tiny red light continued blinking, recording every word, for now. Then, a sound drifted through the cemetery, not from below, not from the road, from somewhere beyond the old oak trees. Footsteps, slow, measured. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Everyone turned toward the woods. A lone figure emerged from between the trees. An elderly woman dressed in a dark blue coat, white hair tied neatly behind her head. She carried no flowers, no bag, only a yellowed envelope. She stopped exactly 10 feet from the monument, looked directly at Emma, then asked, in a calm voice that carried across the silent cemetery, "You finally found the first door?" Emma's heartbeat quickened. The woman smiled faintly. "But tell me, has anyone warned you about the second one? The keeper of the second door?" No one answered. The elderly woman remained perfectly still. She looked neither frightened nor surprised. Instead, she looked disappointed, as if she had expected this meeting years ago. Emma stepped forward. "You know about the monument?" The woman nodded once. "I know what it was built to protect." Walter stared at her. "I've been coming here every Sunday for 23 years. I've never seen you. You weren't supposed to." Her answer came so naturally that nobody challenged it. She extended the yellowed envelope toward Emma. "Take it." Emma hesitated. "Who are you?" "My name won't help you. I asked who you are." The woman smiled faintly. "Someone who made the same mistake you're making now." Emma accepted the envelope. The paper felt brittle. Old, much older than the envelope itself. The seal had already been broken. Someone wanted it to be read, not preserved. Inside, there was only one folded sheet, no handwriting, only a typewritten sentence. "If the first door is opened, the second door must remain closed." Emma looked up. "What second door?" The woman pointed toward the monument. "You've already found the entrance. You just don't know which one." Jonathan frowned. The radar only detected one steel hatch. It detected one object. The woman corrected him calmly. It wasn't looking for another. Jonathan folded his arms. "You've seen the radar image? Well, then how do you know?" She looked directly at him. "Because I was standing here the last time someone used it." Silence. Walter slowly removed his glasses. "When?" 1998. Walter's face changed instantly. That was 1 year, before Helen disappeared. Emma watched every expression. Walter wasn't pretending. The date meant something. "You were here?" The woman nodded. So was Helen. Walter took an involuntary step forward. "You knew my wife?" I tried to stop her. His voice cracked. "What happened to her?" The woman closed her eyes. "For 23 years. I've wished someone would ask me that." The wind carried dry leaves across the cemetery. No one moved. "Finally," the woman continued, "Helen wasn't taken." Walter stared at her. "She chose." "No." Walter shook his head violently. "No. She would never leave." The woman looked at him with genuine sympathy. She didn't leave. She crossed. Every muscle in Emma's body tightened. Crossed? The word sounded absurd, almost supernatural. Yet nothing about this investigation had allowed supernatural explanations. Emma spoke carefully. "What does crossed mean?" The woman looked directly into her eyes. "It means she walked through the first door." Jonathan exhaled sharply. "This is ridiculous. There isn't any underground passage 20 feet below solid granite." The woman nodded. "You're right. There isn't." Jonathan looked momentarily satisfied. Then she added quietly, "The door doesn't go down." He frowned. "What? It never has." Emma felt a chill. "If it doesn't go down, where does it go?" The woman answered without hesitation. "Sideways." Nobody spoke. The word lingered in the cold morning air. Sideways. Not underground. Not upward. Not into a bunker. Something else. Something that made no physical sense. Emma immediately rejected the idea. "No. There has to be another explanation. There always is." The woman smiled. "I hoped you'd say that." She reached into the pocket of her blue coat. Instead of another letter, she removed a small brass compass. Its glass was scratched, its casing worn smooth by decades of use. She handed it to Emma. It belonged to Helen. Walter's breath caught. Emma carefully accepted it. The compass needle wasn't pointing north. It wasn't spinning. It was fixed, directly at the black monument. Emma turned slowly. The needle turned with her, always pointing toward the monument. She faced east. The needle shifted. West. It shifted again. South. Again. No matter where Emma stood, the needle refused to point anywhere except the polished granite. Jonathan reached for it. It must be magnetized. Emma handed it over. Jonathan removed the metal flashlight from his belt. Nothing changed. He held the compass beside the utility truck. Nothing. He walked nearly 30 yards away. The needle remained locked. Toward the monument. Exactly. Every time. Eric quietly broke the silence. "My brother. He carried one just like this." The woman looked at him. "I know." Eric froze. You knew Michael too? She nodded. He was the last person who found the second door. The cemetery fell silent once more. Emma's pulse quickened. Helen Grayson, Michael Sullivan, both connected to Ashcroft. Both disappeared. Both somehow connected to a mysterious second door. She opened her notebook again, but before her pen touched the paper, her voice recorder suddenly emitted a sharp electronic beep. Then another. Then, without anyone touching it, a calm, recorded voice began playing through its tiny speaker. It wasn't Emma's. It wasn't anyone standing in the cemetery. The recording began with a single sentence. If you're hearing this, then you've already met the woman in the blue coat. Every eye turned toward her. The woman didn't look surprised. She simply whispered. He finally remembered, the voice that shouldn't exist. The recording continued. Nobody touched the recorder. Emma had switched it on less than 5 minutes earlier. There shouldn't have been anything else stored on it. Yet the unfamiliar voice spoke calmly, measured, deliberate. If you're hearing this, then you've already met the woman in the blue coat. Emma slowly picked up the recorder. The timer was still running. 00:04:52. It was recording, not playing. And yet, the voice continued. Do not ask her name. She has used too many. Walter looked at the woman. She closed her eyes, as though she'd heard these words before. Many times. Jonathan reached for the recorder. It has to be another file. Emma handed it over. He checked the display. Only one recording existed, created today, at 9:24 a.m. Nothing else. No previous audio, no hidden files. The voice shouldn't have been possible. It continued. If she gives you a compass, accept it. Emma instinctively looked down. The brass compass rested in her palm. Cold, heavy, real. The voice hadn't guessed. It had known. Eric stepped backward. This isn't happening. Nobody answered him, because everyone present had just watched a recording describe events before they happened. Not predict them, describe them, as if someone had already lived through this exact morning. The voice paused, then spoke again. The first mistake is believing the monument changes. Emma froze. The monument doesn't change? The voice continued. It never has. You do. A silence followed that seemed even louder than the words themselves. Emma looked toward the black granite. Every name, every photograph, every rewritten document. What if nothing had ever appeared? What if the monument had always been exactly the same, and only people's memories were changing? She immediately rejected the idea. No, she whispered. My photographs changed. My paperwork changed. My notes. She stopped. Her notebook. Emma quickly flipped through the pages. Her breathing slowed. Every page she had written since arriving was blank, not crossed out, not erased. Blank, as though the ink had never touched the paper. Only one thing remained. A single sentence, written in handwriting she didn't recognize. Memory disappears first. Emma stared. I didn't write this. Walter quietly answered. No, I think you will. The recorder spoke once more. If you're still listening, then I failed. Emma's heart skipped. Failed? The voice sounded older now, more tired. I couldn't stop the cycle. I only delayed it. Jonathan frowned. What cycle? The recorder answered, almost as if it had heard him. Every 23 years, someone finds the first door. Emma looked toward the monument. 23 years. Walter had been coming here. For exactly 23 years. Helen disappeared. 23 years ago. Nothing about that number was accidental. The woman in the blue coat finally spoke. I told him not to record it. Emma looked up. You knew the man. The woman nodded. He wouldn't listen. Who was he? Instead of answering, she looked toward Walter. You've been asking where Helen went. Walter's lips trembled. Yes, The woman lowered her eyes. The voice belongs to her husband. Walter frowned. I'm her husband. The woman looked at him with unmistakable sadness. She whispered, the other one. Nobody moved. Emma felt the air leave her lungs. Other one? Walter's face became completely expressionless. What are you talking about? The woman took a slow breath. Helen Grayson was married twice. Walter shook his head immediately. That's impossible. I married her in 1993. The woman nodded. I know. Walter's voice grew louder. I was the only husband she ever had. Again. The woman nodded. You remember being the only one. Silence. Then she asked the question that shattered everything. Walter, have you ever wondered why there isn't a single wedding photograph in your house? Walter opened his mouth, then stopped. Emma watched confusion spread across his face. He blinked once, twice. His breathing slowed. He searched his memory. There were photographs, family dinners, vacations, birthdays, Christmas, but not one wedding picture. Not one. Walter whispered. They were lost. The woman gently shook her head. Were they? Walter didn't answer, because for the first time in 23 years, he couldn't remember losing them. He only remembered not having them. The missing years, Walter didn't speak. He couldn't. His mind searched desperately for memories that suddenly felt incomplete. He remembered proposing to Helen. He remembered buying their first house. He remembered her laugh, her handwriting, the way she folded towels, the way she always whistled while making coffee. But the wedding itself, nothing. No church, no courthouse, no reception, no first dance, only a certainty that it had happened. The memory had no beginning, only an ending. Emma watched him carefully. As an investigative journalist, she had interviewed trauma victims before. People sometimes forgot details, dates, faces, conversations. But they never forgot entire events while still remembering the emotions attached to them. Something else was happening. Walter suddenly looked up. I had a ring. Emma frowned. What? Our wedding rings. He lifted his left hand. Only pale skin remained where the band had rested for decades. I remember wearing it. He looked confused. I remember taking it off. He stopped. When? Silence. He searched again. Nothing. Not a single memory explained where it had gone. Only the strange certainty that one day, it simply wasn't there anymore. The woman in the blue coat spoke quietly. Memory doesn't disappear all at once. It lets you keep the feeling. It steals the path. Emma wrote the sentence down. This time, she didn't use her notebook. She opened the notes application on her phone, typed every word, saved it, then immediately took a screenshot. Redundancy. She refused to lose evidence again. Jonathan suddenly cleared his throat. Can I ask you something? The woman nodded. You said Helen had another husband. Yes. What was his name? For the first time, the woman hesitated. Not because she didn't know, because saying it seemed to carry weight. Finally, she answered. Thomas. Walter frowned. Thomas who? The woman slowly shook her head. I don't remember. Emma looked at her sharply. You just said you knew him. I did. Then what's his last name? Can't remember. Emma felt another chill. Not won't. Can't. Do you remember anything about him? The woman closed her eyes. He was tall. He laughed loudly. He always carried a tape recorder. Emma instinctively looked at the digital recorder in her pocket, the one now speaking impossible words. He believed memories could survive on magnetic tape. Jonathan frowned. Could they? The woman answered almost immediately. But he kept trying. Emma replayed the sentence in her mind. Memories. Tape. Recording. Evidence. Thomas believed memories could survive. which meant he already knew they disappeared. "How?" Eric suddenly interrupted. "My brother." Everyone turned. "He loved cassette tapes." Emma looked at him. "What?" "He never trusted computers. He said digital files changed too easily." Jonathan laughed nervously. "That doesn't make any sense." Eric ignored him. "Michael carried an old cassette recorder everywhere. He even bought blank tapes after everyone else stopped making them." The woman looked at Eric with quiet recognition. He learned that from Thomas. Emma's pulse quickened. Helen, Thomas, Michael. Somehow, these people were connected across decades, not by family, not by work, by knowledge. Each had discovered something. Each had tried to preserve it. Each had disappeared. The recorder crackled again. The unfamiliar voice returned. "If Walter is still there..." Walter froze. The voice continued. "Don't let him blame himself." Walter's breathing became uneven. "He'll want to. He always does." The old man whispered, "Who are you?" For several seconds, only static answered. Then, very softly, the voice said, "You used to call me Tom." Walter's eyes widened. Tom. Not Thomas. Tom. The nickname landed somewhere deep inside his memory, a place he hadn't visited in years. He closed his eyes. A flash. Rain. A pickup truck. Someone laughing. A man handing him a cup of coffee. "Don't lose this one too, Walt." The memory vanished as quickly as it appeared. Walter opened his eyes. "I know him." His voice shook. "I know Tom." Emma leaned forward. "Who is he?" Walter looked utterly confused. He swallowed. "I don't know. I know his voice. I know his face. I know we were friends. But..." He stared helplessly at Emma. "I can't remember a single thing we ever did together." Silence settled over the cemetery. Then the woman spoke the words that none of them were prepared to hear. "You don't remember him, because according to every official record, Thomas Grayson never existed." Emma blinked. "Grayson?" The woman nodded. "He wasn't Helen's first husband." She looked directly at Walter. "He was your older brother, the brother." No one remembered. Walter stared at the woman. Then he laughed. Not because he believed her, because the idea itself was impossible. "I never had a brother." His voice was firm. "Certain. I was an only child." The woman didn't argue. Instead, she asked quietly, "Do you remember your parents' house on Maple Street?" Walter frowned. "Of course. The blue porch, the walnut tree, the old swing my father built." She nodded. "How many bedrooms?" Walter answered immediately. 3. Then, his expression changed. 3? He and his parents had lived there. Why had they needed 3 bedrooms? Emma watched the realization spread across his face. Walter closed his eyes, trying to picture the upstairs hallway. 1 bedroom belonged to his parents. 1 had been his. The 3rd, he remembered walking past it. Its white door, its brass handle, its window facing the backyard. But every time he tried to remember who had slept there, his mind became strangely quiet, like opening a book, only to find every page blank. "No," Walter whispered. "That's not possible." He looked at Emma. "I've been inside that room. I know I have. But I can't remember why." The woman reached into her coat once more. This time, she removed an old black and white photograph. Its edges were cracked. The image had faded badly. She handed it to Walter. "There." Walter looked down. A family stood outside a farmhouse. His father, his mother, a young Walter. And another boy, slightly older, perhaps 14, standing beside him with one arm over his shoulder. Walter's breathing stopped. He recognized the boy instantly. Not because he remembered him, because The boy looked exactly like him. Jonathan leaned closer. They're brothers. Emma nodded slowly. The resemblance was unmistakable. Same eyes, same jawline, same crooked smile. Only one was a few years older. Walter turned the photograph over. On the back, his mother's handwriting. Summer, 1982. Tom and Walter. The ink had faded, but not enough to hide the names. Walter's knees nearly gave way. I've never seen this. The woman looked at him gently. Yes, you have. You just don't remember. Emma immediately took photographs of both sides of the picture, then another, and another. She uploaded copies to cloud storage, emailed them to herself, saved them to 2 different memory cards. She wasn't taking chances anymore. If something was rewriting evidence, she intended to make it work much harder. Eric suddenly spoke. May I see it? Walter silently handed him the photograph. Eric studied it for several seconds, then frowned. This doesn't make sense. Emma looked at him. What? Eric pointed toward the bottom right corner. There are 5 shadows. Everyone looked. 4 people stood in the photograph. Walter's parents. Walter. Tom. 4 figures. Yet on the grass, 5 distinct shadows stretched across the yard. Emma counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th shadow belonged to someone standing just outside the frame. Someone whose body wasn't visible. Only their shadow. Jonathan forced a nervous smile. Probably the photographer. Emma shook her head. No. She pointed carefully. The shadows all fall east. If the photographer stood there, his shadow would fall behind the camera. Jonathan looked again. His smile disappeared. She was right. The 5th shadow couldn't belong to the photographer. It was standing inside the family, between Walter and Tom, where no one appeared in the picture. The woman quietly said, "Turn it over again." Walter obeyed. This time, something had changed. Emma was certain of it. There had only been one line of handwriting before. Now, beneath it, a second sentence had appeared, written in the same faded blue ink. If only one son remains, you remembered the wrong one. Walter's hands began trembling uncontrollably. My mother would never write that. No. The woman whispered. She wrote it 21 years later. Emma looked up sharply. That's impossible. The woman met her eyes. I know. She had already been dead for 6 years. Silence engulfed the cemetery. Emma slowly reached for the photograph. She needed to examine the ink, the paper, the fibers. There had to be a rational explanation. As her fingers touched the edge, the brass compass in her jacket suddenly snapped 90 degrees to the left. For the first time since she had received it, it was no longer pointing toward the monument. It was pointing toward the abandoned caretaker's cottage at the far end of Ashcroft Cemetery, a building no one had paid attention to all morning. The woman in the blue coat saw the movement. Her face lost all color. Very quietly, almost to herself, she whispered, "He found the key. The caretaker's cottage." Nobody noticed the compass at first. Only Emma. The needle no longer pointed toward the monument. It had rotated exactly 90 degrees. Now, it aimed directly at the abandoned caretaker's cottage, a small wooden building hidden beneath decades of ivy and overgrown oak branches. Walter frowned. I've never been inside. The woman in the blue coat looked at him. Yes, you have. Walter closed his eyes. Again, nothing. Emma slowly raised the compass. No matter where she stood, the needle remained fixed on the cottage. Not north, not magnetic. The cottage. Jonathan stepped in front of it. The needle pointed through him. Eric walked around it. No change. The compass wasn't following people. It was following a place. The building stood nearly 200 feet from the monument. Its roof sagged dangerously. Several windows had been boarded shut years ago. One shutter hung crooked from a single rusted hinge. The county demolition notice still clung to the front door. Dated 9 years earlier. Emma frowned. Why wasn't it demolished? Jonathan looked genuinely puzzled. It should have been. He walked closer to the notice. The work order was approved. The contractor was paid. Emma asked quietly, "So why is the building still here?" Jonathan had no answer. The woman remained where she stood. She made no attempt to follow them. Instead, she spoke toward Emma. "If you enter, take nothing." Emma stopped. What? Not a nail, not a photograph, not even a key. Walter looked back. Why? The woman answered without hesitation. Because the cottage remembers. Jonathan sighed. We're back to riddles. She ignored him. I've already said too much. The group crossed the neglected path. Grass reached nearly to their knees. Old stone markers leaned beneath thick vines. Every step disturbed years of silence. When they reached the porch, Emma noticed something strange. The dust wasn't uniform. A narrow strip across the wooden floorboards looked cleaner, not recently swept. Simply less old, as if people still walked the exact same path, again and again, for years, without leaving footprints. Jonathan tried the doorknob. Locked. He examined the rusted lock. No one's opened this in decades. Emma looked down. The brass compass twitched, then settled. Pointing, not at the door. Lower. She crouched. The needle rested directly over the third porch plank from the left. Emma tapped it lightly. Talk. Solid. She tapped the next one. Talk. Solid. Then the third. Thunk. Hollow. Everyone heard it. Jonathan immediately knelt beside her. He knocked again. The hollow echo spread beneath the porch. There shouldn't be empty space under this section. Eric reached for a pry bar from the utility truck. Within seconds, the weathered plank lifted free. A shallow compartment lay beneath, only 12 inches deep, completely dry. Inside rested a small iron key. Nothing else. Walter instinctively reached toward it. Don't! The woman called from across the cemetery. Her voice carried clearly. No one moved. Emma looked back. You said don't take anything. I did. Then why is it here? The woman's answer came slowly. Because it isn't waiting for you. Silence. Emma looked down again. The key was old, hand-forged. Its bow carried a tiny engraved symbol. Not a number. Not a letter. A simple circle, divided by a single horizontal line. Emma had never seen it before, but Walter suddenly inhaled sharply. I know that mark. Everyone turned toward him. You've seen it? Walter nodded uncertainly. He pressed 2 fingers against his temple. It's on something. What? I don't know, but his breathing quickened. I've touched it before, without warning. The front door of the caretaker's cottage creaked open by itself. Only a few inches. No wind, no one touching it. Just enough to reveal darkness beyond. Jonathan immediately stepped forward. It's settling. The hinges, probably. His explanation stopped. Something had slid across the floor inside. A yellowed envelope. Slowly, silently, until it came to rest in the doorway. No hands, no visible mechanism. Just an envelope emerging from the darkness. Emma stared. On the front, written in neat black ink, were 4 words. For Emma. After 10 chapters. The letter waiting for Emma. Nobody crossed the doorway. Not immediately. The envelope rested on the warped wooden floor, exactly where it had stopped, as though someone inside had gently pushed it forward. Emma stared at it. Her name appeared in crisp black type, not handwriting, not printed by a modern printer. Old typewriter ink, slightly uneven, every letter pressed into the paper. Walter whispered, "It knows your name." Emma answered quietly, "No, someone does." Jonathan walked slowly around the cottage, checking every window, every broken shutter, every possible entrance. The rear door was chained from the outside. The windows remained nailed shut. There was nowhere anyone could have stood. No hidden passage, no place for a person to disappear. Yet, the envelope had moved. Emma activated the flashlight on her phone. The narrow beam reached only a few feet into the cottage. Dust floated lazily through the stale air. An overturned chair, a rusted wood stove, a collapsed bookshelf. Nothing else. No footsteps, no movement, no sign that anyone had occupied the building in decades. Jonathan stepped onto the porch. The floor hasn't been disturbed. Emma looked down. He was right. The dust covering the wooden boards inside remained completely undisturbed, except for a single narrow trail, a perfectly straight line, beginning deep inside the cottage, ending beneath the envelope, as though the paper had slid across untouched dust, without anything pushing it. Eric crouched beside the doorway. "Don't touch it yet." Emma looked at him. "Why?" "My brother. He always photographed everything first." Emma nodded. She took wide shots, close-ups, the dust, the trail, the envelope, the doorway, the hinges, every angle she could think of. Then she slowly reached forward. The paper felt cold, unexpectedly cold, not damp, not frozen, just colder than the surrounding air. Inside, there was only one folded page. At the top, a date. October 12th. Today's date. Emma frowned. The paper itself looked at least 30 years old, yet the date matched this morning. Below it, only 3 short paragraphs. Emma read aloud. "If you are reading this, you ignored the first warning." Nobody spoke. She continued, "Do not search for the person sending the messages. You have already met me." Emma slowly lowered the paper. "Met me?" She looked around instinctively. Walter, Jonathan, Eric, the woman in the blue coat. Which one? The final paragraph contained only one sentence. "When you discover who I am, one of us will disappear." Silence filled the cottage. Even Jonathan said nothing. Emma turned the page over. Blank. No signature. No initials. Nothing. Walter broke the silence. "What does it mean? One of us?" Emma answered honestly. "I don't know." But something about the wording disturbed her. It didn't say, "One of you." It said, "One of us," as though the writer already considered themselves part of the group. Jonathan suddenly noticed something. The typewriter. Everyone looked. Against the far wall, half hidden beneath a collapsed shelf, sat an old black Underwood typewriter. Its ribbon remained installed. A sheet of yellow paper was still rolled into the carriage. Emma approached slowly. The dust covering the machine appeared untouched. Yet, the final line on the page looked darker than the rest, as if it had been typed recently. Very recently. She carefully read it. The letter was finished at 9:46 a.m. Emma instinctively checked her phone. 9:44 a.m. Her pulse quickened. "That's impossible." Jonathan looked at the clock too. "It hasn't happened yet." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Every eye remained fixed on the typewriter. 1 minute passed, then another. 9:45. The cottage remained silent. 9:46. At the exact moment the clock changed, a single metallic sound echoed from inside the typewriter. Click. No keys moved. No hands touched it. But the carriage slowly slid 1 space to the left. Ding. The familiar bell rang softly. A fresh line of ink appeared beneath the others, one letter at a time, as though invisible fingers were pressing unseen keys. Everyone watched, unable to breathe. When the typing finally stopped, only 6 words had been added. Look behind the photograph of Tom. The photograph of Tom. Nobody moved. The final sentence remained fresh on the paper. Look behind the photograph of Tom. Emma slowly turned toward the woman in the blue coat. You knew there was a photograph. The woman answered softly. I hoped there still was. Jonathan searched the caretaker's office first. The walls were nearly bare. Old shelves, rusted hooks, a cracked calendar frozen on June 1998. Nothing resembling a family photograph. Eric checked the bedroom. Walter searched the kitchen. Emma remained beside the typewriter, watching, waiting. Nothing else appeared. 5 minutes passed. Jonathan returned. Nothing. Eric shook his head. The rooms are empty. Walter looked frustrated. There isn't a single photograph anywhere. Emma frowned. The message was too specific. It wouldn't say the photograph of Tom if there wasn't one. She looked around again, slower this time, not searching for a frame, searching for evidence that one had once existed. Then she noticed it. On the wall behind the typewriter, one small rectangle looked cleaner than the surrounding wood. The wallpaper had faded everywhere, except inside a perfectly shaped outline. Something had hung there, for years. Emma stepped closer. A single nail still protruded from the wall. Nothing else. The photograph was gone. Jonathan sighed. So whoever was here took it. Emma slowly shook her head. No. She reached toward the empty rectangle. Her fingertips brushed the wallpaper. The surface felt uneven, not torn, layered. She gently pressed one corner. It lifted. Walter handed her a pocket knife, carefully. She peeled back the brittle wallpaper, only a few inches. Behind it wasn't wood. It was another piece of paper, yellowed with age, pasted directly onto the wall. Emma continued peeling. More appeared. Not wallpaper. A newspaper page. Then another. Then another. The entire wall behind the missing photograph had been covered with newspapers, layer upon layer. Dozens of them. Jonathan looked closer. These aren't random. Emma read the nearest headline. Local man missing after county survey. Another. City engineer vanishes during inspection. Another. Historian disappears without trace. Different years. Different newspapers. Same pattern. Disappearances. Eric's breathing quickened. He suddenly grabbed one article. My brother. Emma looked. The article was tiny. Only 4 paragraphs. County surveyor. Michael Sullivan reported missing. Eric stared at it silently. I've never seen this. Emma frowned. What do you mean? I searched every newspaper, every archive. There was never an article. He looked at the yellow page again. I would have found this, Walter quietly answered. Unless. It wasn't there before. Emma continued removing the brittle layers. Near the center, she finally uncovered what the message had meant. A photograph. Not hanging on the wall. Hidden inside it. Pressed flat between newspaper pages. The edges had almost fused with the paper. She carefully lifted it free. Dust drifted through the beam of her flashlight. The photograph showed 6 people standing outside the caretaker's cottage. The building looked almost new. Fresh paint. Straight porch railings. Clear windows. Emma immediately recognized 3 faces. Walter, 23 years younger. Helen, smiling. And beside them, Tom, the older brother from the family photograph. For the first time, Emma saw him clearly. He looked remarkably ordinary. Dark hair, denim jacket, a small cassette recorder hanging from one shoulder. Nothing about him suggested mystery, except every person in the photograph was smiling. Every person, except Tom. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking behind the photographer. His expression wasn't frightened. It was focused, as though someone had just arrived. Emma slowly turned the photograph over. Blank. She frowned. The message said behind the photograph. Jonathan nodded. So look behind it. Emma held the photograph against the light. Nothing. Then, she noticed the backing felt unusually thick, almost like two photographs glued together. She carefully slid the pocket knife between the layers. The adhesive had become brittle with age. The back separated cleanly. Inside, folded tightly, was a strip of magnetic recording tape. Not a cassette, just the tape itself, about 8 inches long. Walter whispered, "Tom." Eric looked confused. Why hide tape inside a photograph? The woman in the blue coat answered from the doorway. Because paper survives. She paused. Tape remembers. Everyone turned toward her. Emma carefully unfolded the fragile strip. Most of the magnetic coating had flaked away. Only a few inches remained intact, hardly enough to preserve more than a minute of audio. The woman stared at it. For the first time, fear crossed her face, very quietly. She said, "He actually found a way." Emma looked up. A way to do what? The woman met her eyes. To make a memory. That couldn't be rewritten. The room fell silent. Then, from somewhere outside the cottage, a car door slammed. Not the survey truck, a different vehicle, followed by another. Then another. Jonathan moved to the window. 3 black SUVs had just entered Ashcroft Cemetery. None of them carried county markings. The first man stepped out wearing a charcoal gray suit. He looked toward the cottage, then calmly spoke into a radio. They found Tom's recording. Proceed to Phase 2. Phase 2, the sound of the SUV doors echoed through the cemetery. 1, 2, 3. No engines remained running. No one rushed. No one shouted. The men moved with quiet precision. 4 individuals, matching charcoal gray suits. No visible badges. No company logos. No license plates. Only disciplined movements that reminded Emma of trained investigators. Or military personnel. Jonathan peered through the cracked window. "They're not county," Eric whispered. "Police?" Jonathan slowly shook his head. If they were, they would have announced themselves. The lead man stopped halfway between the monument and the caretaker's cottage. He wasn't looking at the building. He was looking at the compass in Emma's hand. Almost as though that, not the recording tape, was his real objective. He spoke calmly into the radio clipped beneath his jacket. Compass confirmed. Target has both artifacts. Artifacts? Emma exchanged a quick glance with Walter. They had called the compass an artifact. Not evidence, not property. An artifact. The woman in the blue coat suddenly stepped in front of the cottage door, blocking the entrance. Her calm expression disappeared for the first time. "You don't have much time." Emma looked at her. "Who are they?" "They're late." "What?" "They were supposed to arrive before you found the tape." Emma frowned. "You knew this would happen?" "I knew. If Tom succeeded, they always came. Outside." The lead man removed a thin folder from beneath his arm. He didn't open it. He simply held it where everyone inside could see. On the front, stamped in faded black ink, Emma recognized the same strange symbol engraved on the iron key beneath the porch. A perfect circle, divided by a single horizontal line. Her pulse quickened. The symbol appeared again. The key, the folder. Someone had been marking connected objects. For decades. The lead man spoke loudly enough for everyone inside to hear. "Emma Carter." His voice was calm. controlled. "We're not here to hurt anyone." No one answered. He continued, "You've recovered something that doesn't belong to you." Emma instinctively closed her hand around the magnetic tape. "It belongs to Tom." The man smiled faintly. "No, it belonged to Thomas Grayson. The tape belongs to us." Walter stepped toward the doorway. "You know my brother?" The man looked directly at him. "Yes." Walter's breathing became uneven. "Where is he?" The smile disappeared. "He stopped existing 23 years ago." Emma immediately noticed the wording. Not, "he died." Not, "he disappeared." Stopped existing. Every sentence these people spoke seemed carefully chosen. Jonathan quietly reached for the pry bar leaning against the wall. The lead man noticed immediately. "I wouldn't." Jonathan ignored him. The man sighed. "You've misunderstood. We aren't your enemy." Emma answered sharply, "Then tell us who you are." For several seconds, the man remained silent. Then he finally replied, "We're the continuity office." No reaction. The name meant nothing to any of them. He seemed unsurprised. "It never does." Emma frowned. "There is no government department called the continuity office. Officially? No. But unofficially?" He looked toward the monument. "Someone has to preserve reality." The room fell silent. Even Jonathan didn't interrupt. The statement sounded absurd. Yet after everything they had witnessed, no one dismissed it outright. The man continued. "The monument, the doors, the disappearances. They aren't accidents. They're containment." Emma felt the word settle heavily inside her mind. Containment. Not imprisonment. Not secrecy. Containment. As though something dangerous needed to remain confined. Walter finally spoke. "My wife." The man looked at him. "What happened to Helen?" For the first time, the man's expression softened. He answered quietly. "She volunteered." Walter whispered, "For what?" The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked toward Emma, then toward the strip of magnetic tape in her hand. "Finally," he said the one sentence that froze everyone in the cottage. "She crossed over to stop your brother from coming back." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Walter stared at him in disbelief. "What?" The lead man slowly opened the folder. Inside was a single black and white photograph. It showed two men standing shoulder to shoulder. Walter recognized both instantly. Himself and Tom. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The date written beneath the photograph read, October 19th, 2026. 1 week from today. Even more impossible. Both brothers looked almost exactly as they did in 1998, not a single day older. And behind them, standing in the doorway of the caretaker's cottage, was Emma, the photograph. From next week, Emma couldn't take her eyes off the photograph, October 19th, 2026. 7 days from now, impossible, yet everything inside the image looked painfully real. Walter, Tom, standing shoulder to shoulder. Neither of them appeared older than they did in the faded photographs from decades earlier. And behind them, Emma, standing in the doorway of the caretaker's cottage, watching, not surprised, as if she already knew exactly what was about to happen. Jonathan reached for the photograph. "You printed this." The man from the continuity office handed it over without resistance. "Check it." Jonathan examined the paper carefully. Silver gelatin, not modern inkjet. Real photographic paper. The manufacturer had stopped producing this stock more than 20 years ago. This, Jonathan frowned, shouldn't exist. The man nodded. "It shouldn't." Emma looked closer. Something caught her attention. Tom wasn't looking at the camera, just like every other photograph they had found. Instead, he was staring directly at Emma. Not the Emma standing behind him. The Emma holding the photograph now. A chill ran through her. It felt less like an old photograph and more like eye contact. Walter whispered, "Tom." His fingers trembled as they traced his brother's face. "I remember this jacket." He closed his eyes. Another fragment surfaced. Rain. A truck. Tom laughing. "Whatever happens, don't let them separate us." The memory shattered before Walter could hold on to it. He gasped. "No, they always disappear." Emma looked at him. "What does?" "The memories. They disappear the moment I understand them." The man in the gray suit nodded quietly. "Exactly." Walter looked at him angrily. "You knew. We've always known. Then why didn't you stop it?" The man answered without emotion. "We did. For 23 years. Emma stepped forward. "What exactly is the continuity office?" The man considered the question carefully. Then he replied, "We don't investigate disappearances. We investigate continuity failures." Emma frowned. "What does that mean?" He pointed toward the photograph. "Reality depends on memory. When enough connected memories contradict each other, history begins correcting itself." Jonathan shook his head. "That's impossible." "So was today's photograph," the man replied. Jonathan fell silent. The woman in the blue coat spoke for the first time since the SUVs arrived. "Tell them the truth." The man looked at her. "They're not ready." They stopped being unready the moment Emma touched the tape. Silence followed. Then, the man slowly nodded. He removed another document from the folder. Unlike the others, this wasn't a report. It was a map. Ashcroft Cemetery, the monument, the caretaker's cottage, and beneath both, 2 circles, connected by a single straight line. Emma studied it. The 2 doors. The man nodded. "Yes, the first door." He tapped the circle beneath the monument. "The second door." He tapped the one beneath the cottage. Emma looked between them. "They're connected. They always were." Walter frowned. "So why hide one beneath the monument and the other beneath the cottage?" The man's answer came immediately. "Because they were never meant to be opened together." Eric suddenly pointed to the map. "What's that?" Near the edge of the paper, a 3rd circle had been drawn. Smaller, fainter, almost erased. Emma looked up. "There are 3?" The man's face changed. For the first time, he looked genuinely unsettled. Very quietly, he asked, "Who showed you that?" Emma frowned. "It's on your map." He immediately took it back, looked down. The 3rd circle wasn't there. Only 2 remained. He stared at the paper for several long seconds, then slowly raised his eyes toward Emma. It wasn't. Emma felt her heartbeat quicken. "I saw it. So did Eric." Eric nodded immediately. "I did." Jonathan frowned. "I only saw 2. Walter looked equally confused. "I never saw a 3rd. The room became silent. The man folded the map carefully. His composure had vanished. He turned toward the woman in the blue coat. "You told her?" She shook her head. "I didn't have to." The man whispered something Emma barely heard. "Then it's happening earlier." He looked directly at Emma. "When you looked at the map, did the 3rd circle have a label?" Emma searched her memory. She hadn't meant to notice it. Yet somehow, the word had remained perfectly clear. She answered quietly, "Yes." "What did it say?" Emma swallowed. "It said." She hesitated. "Return." No one spoke. Not Jonathan. Not Walter. Not even the woman in the blue coat. Only the man from the continuity office closed his eyes, then whispered a sentence that seemed to drain every trace of confidence from his voice. "It has never revealed the 3rd door before someone found Tom." The 3rd door. No one moved. The word echoed silently through Emma's mind. Return. Not escape. Not exit. Return. It implied something far more disturbing. Someone, or something, could come back. The man from the continuity office slowly folded the map. His hands were no longer steady. For the first time since arriving, he looked frightened. Walter noticed. "You've never seen that word before?" The man answered honestly. "No. I've spent 31 years studying Ashcroft. I've read every surviving report. I've interviewed every witness who still remembered. And not once has anyone seen the third door." Emma asked quietly, "Then why is it on your map?" He hesitated. "It isn't." Emma took one step closer. "You said reality rewrites evidence." "Yes. What if it rewrites your records too?" Silence. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he slowly opened the folder again, removed the map, laid it across the hood of the nearest SUV. Everyone leaned closer. 2 circles. The monument. The cottage. Nothing else. Exactly as before. Emma frowned. "I know what I saw." Eric nodded. "So do I." Jonathan looked confused. "I still only see 2. Walter rubbed his forehead. "I don't even remember looking for a third." The differences between them were growing. Not everyone remembered the same reality anymore. The woman in the blue coat spoke softly. "It has begun." Emma looked toward her. "What has?" "The separation." Jonathan frowned. "What separation?" The woman drew a slow breath. "There comes a point when people standing in the same place are no longer standing in the same history." Nobody laughed. Nobody dismissed the idea. After everything they had witnessed, it sounded terrifyingly possible. The lead agent quietly reached into his jacket. Instead of a weapon, he produced a slim leather notebook. The cover carried the same circular symbol. He flipped through dozens of handwritten pages. Dates, locations, names. Finally, he stopped. Ashcroft Cemetery. Cycle 7. Emma noticed something unusual. Several lines had been scratched out, not crossed out, scraped away, as if someone had physically removed the ink. The agent spoke without looking up. "There have been 6 previous cycles." Walter looked surprised. "Cycles? Every 23 years? The first door is discovered. The second door follows. Someone remembers too much." Emma whispered, "And then?" The man slowly closed the notebook. "The cycle resets." Walter's expression hardened. "What happens to the people?" The agent looked directly at him. "They stop agreeing." Emma frowned. "What does that mean?" He answered quietly. "You already experienced it. You remembered having no brother." Emma nodded slowly. Eric remembered a newspaper that had never existed. Jonathan remembered driving past a cemetery he'd never visited. Each memory contradicted reality. Or perhaps reality contradicted the memories. Emma looked down at Tom's magnetic tape, still resting safely inside the photograph. What did Tom discover? The agent's eyes settled on the tape. He proved the resets weren't complete. Emma waited. He found something that survived every cycle. Emma slowly raised the fragile strip. "This?" The man nodded. "Not the tape. The recording." The woman in the blue coat closed her eyes. "He finally did it," Jonathan interrupted. "Can someone explain something?" Everyone looked toward him. If this recording survives every reset, why hasn't anyone listened to it before? Silence. The agent answered. "They did." "When?" "Every cycle." "And?" "They never reached the end." Emma felt a chill crawl across her shoulders. "What happens?" The agent didn't respond. Instead, he reached into the folder one final time. This time, he removed an evidence bag. Inside lay an old cassette tape, labeled in faded black marker. "Tom, Master recording. Emma stared. But I have Tom's tape. The agent nodded. No. You have the key. He held up the cassette. This is the lock. Before Emma could ask another question, a shrill electronic tone erupted from inside the cottage. Everyone turned. The old Underwood typewriter had come to life again. Its keys began striking rapidly. No invisible pauses this time. No slow, deliberate words. Every key hammered down in frantic succession. Clack, 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 clack. The carriage raced from left to right. Ink splashed across the paper, line after line, faster than anyone could read. Jonathan stepped back. What the hell? The bell rang. Again. 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 Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The room fell silent. Emma carefully removed the freshly typed page. Only one sentence filled the sheet, written in capital letters. Do not let them play the cassette. Beneath it, a second line appeared, smaller, as though typed by a different hand. The voice isn't Tom's anymore. The wrong voice. No one touched the cassette, not after reading the warning. The evidence bag remained sealed in the agent's hand. Inside, the cassette looked ordinary. Clear plastic shell, white paper label, black marker. Tom. Master recording. Nothing about it suggested danger, yet every person in the cottage now stared at it, as if it were alive. Emma looked from the cassette to the strip of magnetic tape hidden inside Tom's photograph. The lock. The key. She whispered the words back to herself, then looked at the continuity agent. What happens if they're combined? He answered immediately. We hear the complete recording. And? Silence. The agent didn't answer. Instead, his eyes shifted toward the woman in the blue coat. She quietly shook her head. No. Emma stepped closer. You're hiding something. The agent nodded. Yes. What? We've never survived past that point. The room became completely silent. Jonathan frowned. What does that even mean? The agent spoke carefully. As far as our records show, every previous cycle ended before the recording finished. Emma blinked. Ended? You mean people died? No. They disappeared? No. He took a slow breath. The cycle restarted. Walter looked confused. So nobody knows what happens after the tape finishes? The agent lowered his eyes. One person did. Emma's pulse quickened. Tom. The agent nodded. And Helen. Walter closed his eyes. Helen heard it? Yes. And then? The answer came so softly. Walter almost didn't hear it. She volunteered. Emma felt frustration rising. Volunteered for what? The agent finally looked directly at her. To remember... No one spoke. Emma waited. The words sounded simple, almost meaningless. Yet judging by everyone's expression, they carried enormous weight. She asked again, What does that mean? The woman in the blue coat answered this time. It means someone must remember every cycle. Emma frowned. Why? Because if nobody remembers, the next cycle begins with nothing. Eric slowly sat down on the old wooden chair. My brother. He remembered? The woman nodded. For a while. And Tom? For longer. And Helen? The woman's voice nearly broke. The longest. Emma suddenly realized something. That's why she disappeared. The woman nodded once. Not because she ain't, because memory needs somewhere to exist. Jonathan looked completely lost. What are you talking about? The woman searched for words. Finally, she pointed toward the monument outside. Imagine. History is a book. Jonathan nodded cautiously. Every 23 years, someone tears out the last chapter. Emma understood immediately. So Helen became the missing chapter. The woman smiled sadly. Exactly. Walter buried his face in his hands. For 23 years, I thought she abandoned me. No, the woman whispered. She stayed. So you could... outside. Clouds rolled across the sun. The cemetery grew noticeably darker. The lead agent checked his watch. His expression changed. We're running out of time. Emma looked up. For what? The window. What window? The first door closes at sunset. The second door closes an hour later. Emma immediately remembered the anonymous warning. Don't open it before Sunday ends. Everything suddenly aligned. The message had never said, don't open it. Because it had to be opened. Just not yet. The old typewriter suddenly struck a single key. Click. Everyone turned. One fresh line appeared beneath the previous warning. The first lie was that there were 3 doors. Emma frowned. What? The agent stepped toward the paper, his face drained of color. No, the typewriter struck again. Click. Another sentence appeared. Count the shadows. Silence. Emma's eyes widened. The shadows. Tom's family photograph. 4 people. 5 shadows. She looked around the room instinctively. Late morning sunlight streamed through the broken windows. Everyone cast a clear shadow across the wooden floor. Emma counted. Jonathan. Eric. Walter. The woman in the blue coat. The continuity agent. Herself. 6 people. She counted the shadows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Then she stopped. There was one more. A 7th shadow. Standing silently behind the continuity agent. Perfectly human. Perfectly still. Attached. To no one. The 7th shadow. Emma counted again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There was no mistake. Every person inside the caretaker's cottage cast a shadow across the worn wooden floor. Except there was one shadow too many. It stood directly behind the continuity agent. Shoulders squared, hands resting calmly at its sides. Perfectly human. Perfectly still. Yet, when Emma looked over the agent's shoulder, nothing was there. Her breathing slowed. Don't move. The agent frowned. What? Don't. He saw the look in her eyes and instinctively froze. What are you looking at? Emma didn't answer. She slowly raised her phone, opened the camera, turned it toward him. The screen showed exactly what her eyes had seen. The agent. And behind him, another figure, not transparent, not blurry. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long dark coat. His face remained hidden in shadow. Jonathan stepped beside Emma. What is it? She handed him the phone. Jonathan looked at the screen. His expression immediately changed. You see him? Emma whispered. You do? Jonathan nodded. I thought, he swallowed. I thought it was a reflection. It isn't. Eric reached for the phone. He stared for several long seconds. He frowned. I only see 6. Emma looked at him. You don't see the man? Eric slowly shook his head. No. The differences were growing again. Not everyone was seeing the same reality. Walter suddenly looked toward the empty space behind the agent. Not through the phone. Directly. His lips parted. His breathing stopped. Tom? The room fell silent. Emma turned sharply. What? Walter never looked away. His eyes had filled with tears. It's him. The agent's face drained of color. You can see him? Walter nodded slowly. My brother. The woman in the blue coat closed her eyes. No. She whispered. It's too soon. Emma looked from Walter to the phone. The man behind the agent slowly raised one hand, not waving, pointing. toward the old Underwood typewriter. Emma instinctively turned. The typewriter had begun moving again. No keys struck. No carriage shifted. Instead, the entire machine rotated. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, until it faced the far wall. Everyone followed its direction. The wall appeared ordinary. Old wood, peeling paint. Nothing else. Then, a narrow rectangle of sunlight slid across the boards as clouds drifted overhead. For less than a second, a thin vertical seam became visible. Not part of the wall. A hidden door. Perfectly flush with the surrounding wood. Impossible to notice under normal light. Jonathan rushed forward. He pressed against the wall. Nothing. He knocked. Solid. Emma walked closer. The brass compass in her pocket suddenly vibrated. She pulled it out. The needle no longer pointed toward the monument or the cottage. It pointed directly at the hidden seam. The compass had found another destination. The continuity agent stepped between Emma and the wall. "No." His voice was sharper than before. "We don't open that." Emma frowned. "You just said there were only 2 doors." "I lied." Silence. "You lied?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because nobody has ever survived opening the 3rd. Emma stared at him. "So it does exist." The agent lowered his head. "It wasn't supposed to." Walter suddenly spoke, without taking his eyes off the empty space beside the typewriter. "Tom's gone." Emma turned. The shadow behind the agent had vanished. The phone camera now showed only 6 people, nothing else. But something remained. On the dusty wooden floor, fresh footprints. 1 pair, large boots, beginning nowhere, ending at the hidden wall. Emma knelt beside them. The dust around the prints remained untouched. No entrance, no exit. The tracks simply appeared. She followed them carefully. The final footprint stopped exactly before the narrow seam, and beneath it, someone had scratched a single sentence into the dust. Not with a stick, not with a shoe, with a fingertip. The letters were still fresh. "I never left." Before anyone could react, 3 heavy knocks echoed from inside the hidden wall. Knock, knock, knock. Not outside, not behind the cottage, inside the wall itself. Then, a man's calm voice spoke from the other side. Softly, clearly, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Emma, it's safe now." She froze, because she recognized the voice instantly. It was the same voice, from the impossible recording. Tom. The voice behind the wall. Nobody breathed. The words hung in the stale air inside the caretaker's cottage. "Emma, it's safe now." The voice was calm, measured, exactly the same voice that had emerged from the impossible recordings. "Tom." Walter took 1 trembling step toward the hidden wall. "Tom?" Silence. Then, the voice answered. "Hello, Walt." Walter's knees nearly buckled. He hadn't introduced himself. Not today. Not to the voice. Yet whoever stood beyond the wall knew the nickname only his brother had ever used. Emma moved closer. "Who are you?" A brief pause. Then, "I've been trying to answer that question. For 23 years. The words carried no fear, only exhaustion. The continuity agent suddenly raised one hand. "Nobody opens that door." His voice had changed. Gone was the calm professionalism. Now, there was urgency, almost panic. Jonathan looked at him. "You said nobody survived opening it." "I did." "And?" The agent stared at the wall. "I wasn't talking about the people inside." Emma frowned. "What does that mean?" Before he could answer, Tom spoke again. "He's telling you the version they were taught." Silence. The version that's kept the cycle alive. The woman in the blue coat closed her eyes. No, she whispered. Don't make her choose. Tom answered gently. She already has. Emma looked from one face to another. Nothing aligned anymore. The continuity office insisted the doors contained something dangerous. Tom insisted they were preserving a lie. The woman seemed to know both sides. Someone wasn't telling the whole truth. Maybe no one was. Walter stepped to the hidden wall. His hand hovered inches from the narrow seam. Tom, his voice cracked. If that's really you, tell me something. Anything. Something only my brother would know. The cottage fell silent. Nearly 10 seconds passed. Then, Tom laughed softly. Not loudly, just enough to sound familiar. Walt, you were 8. You broke Mom's kitchen window. Walter frowned. I remember that. Tom replied. You remember Dad blaming the baseball. Another pause. It wasn't the baseball. Walter's breathing stopped. It was me. You dropped your telescope. I took the blame. So Dad wouldn't sell it. Walter closed his eyes. A memory surfaced. Not complete. Only fragments. Rain against glass. His father shouting. Tom standing quietly beside the broken window. Walter had spent his entire life believing the accident involved a baseball. Now, something deeper stirred. A telescope. The stars. Tom smiling. Don't tell Dad. The memory hit him like a wave. Walter staggered backward. Oh my God, his voice barely escaped. You were there. The woman in the blue coat began crying, very quietly. She had waited decades for that sentence, not because Walter remembered everything, but because, for the first time, he remembered something that had never returned before. The continuity agent noticed it too. His face turned pale. He shouldn't be able to remember that. Emma looked sharply at him. Why not? The agent answered honestly. Because that memory was erased during Cycle 4. Silence. Emma stared. Cycle 4? He nodded slowly. 23 years before Helen disappeared. Emma's pulse quickened. Wait. She stepped toward him. If Walter just recovered a memory from Cycle 4, then memories aren't disappearing. She looked toward the hidden wall. They're being stored. Nobody answered, because every person in the room already knew she was right. The brass compass suddenly spun violently, not slowly, not gradually, rapidly, round and round. Its needle blurred into a silver circle. Emma nearly dropped it. Then, without warning, it stopped, pointing, not at the hidden wall, not at the monument, not at the caretaker's cottage. It pointed directly at the continuity agent. Everyone looked at him. The agent slowly lowered his eyes to the compass. Then, almost reluctantly, he removed the leather glove from his right hand, across the center of his palm. Burned into the skin was the same circular symbol they had seen on the key, on the folder, on the map. Only this one was different. A thin crack ran straight through the circle, as if it had been broken. Tom's voice came quietly through the wall. There. Emma looked toward the hidden door. Tom continued. Now you know. Which one of us crossed back? The man who returned, nobody spoke. The compass remained perfectly still. Its needle pointed directly at the continuity agent, not the wall, not the monument. Him. The burned symbol in the center of his palm seemed older than the scar surrounding it. Not a tattoo, not a brand made by metal. The mark looked as though it had always been part of his skin. Only broken. Emma looked at him. You crossed. The agent didn't deny it. Walter stared. You've been through the third door. A long silence followed. Finally. The agent nodded. Once. His voice sounded different now. Not official. Not rehearsed. just tired. I was never supposed to come back." Tom spoke gently from behind the hidden wall. "Tell them your real name." The agent closed his eyes. Emma watched his shoulders rise and fall. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then, very quietly, "My name is Michael Sullivan." Eric stopped breathing. "What?" The world seemed to fall silent. "My brother?" The agent nodded. "I'm sorry." Eric staggered backward. "No, my brother disappeared 11 years ago. I know. You can't be him. I know." Emma looked from Eric to the man standing before her. The age didn't fit. Michael should have been in his early 40s. This man looked barely 30, almost untouched by time, exactly like Tom. In the impossible photograph, exactly like Walter beside him. None of them appeared to age normally. Eric whispered, "You left me." Michael slowly shook his head. "No, I never found the way back." Silence. When I finally did, only a few days had passed for me. He looked at Eric, but for you, it had been 11 years. Walter suddenly understood. "The photograph." Emma turned toward him. "What?" "The picture from next week." Walter pointed toward the hidden wall. "Tom," he pointed toward Michael, "and him. They haven't aged." Emma felt another piece fall into place. The photographs, the disappearances, the missing years. People weren't dying. They weren't vanishing. Time itself was flowing differently. Tom's voice continued. "The third door doesn't lead somewhere else." Emma waited. "It leads to the time between memories." Nobody moved. Jonathan quietly lowered the pry bar. For once, he had no logical objection, not because he understood, because every fact they had gathered pointed toward the same impossible conclusion. Michael removed another object from inside his jacket, a pocket watch, old silver, its glass badly scratched. He handed it to Emma. It stopped. Emma looked down. The hands pointed to exactly one time, 9:46. The same time the impossible letter had finished typing. The same time written on the page before it happened. Michael smiled faintly. It never moved again. "When, the day I crossed..." Emma slowly opened the watch. Inside the cover, someone had engraved a short sentence, not professionally, done by hand. The letters were uneven. She read it aloud. "If you return..." She stopped. There was more. She turned the watch slightly toward the light. The remaining words had almost disappeared with age. "Don't return alone." Walter closed his eyes. Tom wrote that. Michael nodded. He thought someone else would eventually find the third door. Emma whispered he was waiting. Michael looked toward the hidden wall. No. He was preparing. Then, for the first time, the hidden wall itself changed. A low mechanical sound echoed inside the timber frame, not supernatural, not mysterious. Old machinery, rusted gears, heavy locks, one after another. Click, click, click. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The narrow seam widened, barely an inch. Then 2. Cold air poured into the cottage. Not damp, not underground. Air carrying the faint scent of rain, fresh pine, and distant ocean salt. Impossible. Ashcroft Cemetery stood hundreds of miles from any coast. Tom spoke one final time. His voice was closer now, almost beside them. "Emma, I need you to understand something before you decide." Emma stepped toward the opening. "I'm listening." Silence. Then, the words that changed everything. The third door was never built to keep people out. A pause. It was built to keep history from escaping. The opening widened another inch, just enough for a single beam of pale blue light to spill into the room. Everyone stared, because the light wasn't coming from lamps, or sunlight, or electricity. Beyond the narrow gap, they could all see it. A calm shoreline, gentle waves rolling onto white sand, a sky painted with the colors of late afternoon, and standing alone on the beach, a woman in a gray coat. She slowly turned toward the doorway, smiled, and whispered the name Walter had waited 23 years to hear. Helen. Helen Walter couldn't breathe. The woman standing on the distant shoreline smiled exactly the way he remembered. Not older, not younger. Exactly as she had been on the morning she disappeared. The gray coat, the loose strand of hair the wind always pulled across her face, the small scar beneath her left eyebrow, details memory alone could never preserve for 23 years. Yet there she was, alive. Walt, her voice drifted through the narrow opening, softly, almost carried by the waves themselves. I've missed you. Walter took one step toward the widening gap. Emma instinctively reached for his arm. Wait. He looked at her. Tears streamed down his face. That's Helen. I know. We don't know what we're seeing. Walter smiled sadly. I do. The continuity agent, Michael Sullivan, moved between Walter and the opening. You can't cross. Walter's expression hardened. Move. Michael didn't. If you go now, you won't come back. Walter answered without hesitation. She didn't. Michael lowered his eyes. Exactly. Tom spoke again from somewhere beyond the shoreline. His voice echoed strangely now. Not from one direction, from everywhere. Walt, listen to him. Walter froze. You stayed away for 23 years. You can stay away for 5 more minutes. Emma watched the impossible landscape beyond the opening. The waves moved naturally. Seagulls crossed the sky. The light reflected across the water exactly as it should. Nothing looked artificial. Nothing looked like an illusion. It looked real. More real than the cemetery behind them. She glanced back through the cottage window. The cemetery suddenly appeared faded, its colors muted, almost washed away. She blinked. Everything returned to normal. The woman in the blue coat noticed. You saw it? Emma nodded slowly. For a second. This side looked unreal. The woman whispered, That's how it begins. Jonathan quietly stepped beside Emma. I've been thinking. She looked at him. The photographs, the memories, the rewritten documents. Emma waited. What if neither side is fake? Silence. What if both histories happened? Michael looked at Jonathan for a long moment. Then, very quietly, he said, That's the closest anyone has ever come. Emma turned sharply. What does that mean? Michael looked toward the opening. When the third door opens, it doesn't create another world. It separates one history into 2. Walter frowned. So Helen, Michael nodded, lived. Emma finished the thought and disappeared. Michael looked at her. Both are true. No one spoke. Emma's mind raced. 2 histories, 2 versions, neither replacing the other. Both continuing. That explained everything. The rewritten evidence, the conflicting memories, the impossible photographs. Reality wasn't correcting itself. It was choosing which history each person remembered. Helen took one small step closer to the opening. Walt. Walter looked up. She smiled. I kept my promise. His voice trembled. I don't understand. You will. She looked toward Emma. And she will help you. Emma frowned. Me? Helen nodded. You've already done it. I've never met you. Helen's smile deepened. Not yet. Every hair on Emma's arm stood up. Not yet. Not never. Not yet. Michael suddenly checked his pocket watch. The frozen hands still pointed to 9:46. yet his expression changed instantly. "We're out of time." Emma looked toward the gap. The pale blue light had begun fading, almost imperceptibly. The opening was shrinking, not widening, closing. Walter took another desperate step. "Helen!" She raised one hand. "No." Her voice remained calm. "Not today." Walter stopped. "You waited 23 years. I can wait one more week." Everyone turned toward her. 1 week? Emma looked at the impossible photograph from October 19th. The date, 7 days from now. Helen already knew. She wasn't predicting the future. She was remembering it. Tom spoke one last sentence before the opening narrowed further. "Emma, when you leave Ashcroft today, don't go home." Emma's heartbeat quickened. The anonymous messages. "Watch your father. Don't go home." Someone had been trying to keep her alive from the very beginning. She stepped toward the narrowing seam. "Tom," the voice answered immediately. "Yes? Who has been sending the messages?" And for several long seconds, only waves answered. Then, Tom finally replied. "You have." Emma stared at the opening. "What?" The messages were sent next Sunday. The gap narrowed to only a few inches. Tom's final words barely slipped through before the wall sealed shut. "You just haven't remembered sending them yet." Tom's choice. Nobody moved. Helen remained on the distant shoreline. The opening between the two worlds had narrowed to less than 3 feet. Enough to see, not enough to understand. Emma stared at the beach. The waves rolled in exactly the same rhythm as any ordinary coastline. Nothing shimmered. Nothing glowed. It wasn't another dimension. It looked like another afternoon. Michael quietly closed his pocket watch. "You understand now." Emma slowly shook her head. "No. I understand less than I did this morning." Michael nodded. "Good. That means you're finally asking the right questions." Emma looked directly at him. "Tell me the truth. No more riddles." Michael took a slow breath. "The third door was built 72 years ago, not to imprison people, not to hide evidence. It was built after an experiment failed." Walter frowned. "What experiment?" Michael looked toward the shoreline. They wanted to preserve a memory. "Perfectly. No lies, no forgotten names, no rewritten history," Emma whispered. "And they succeeded." Silence. But memory can't exist without someone carrying it. Emma slowly understood. So every time history resets, someone has to stay behind. Michael nodded. Helen volunteered. Tom refused to leave, and I became trapped trying to bring him home. Walter lowered his eyes. "For 23 years, they've been protecting us," Michael answered quietly. "From forgetting everything." Helen smiled across the narrowing opening. "Walt, I never stopped loving you." Walter's shoulders shook. "I know." His voice cracked. "I just wish I'd remembered sooner." Helen gently shook her head. "You remembered exactly when you were supposed to." Emma looked toward the hidden wall. "Tom," the familiar voice answered immediately. "Yes?" "The messages. You really didn't send them?" Tom laughed softly. "No." "You did." Emma frowned. "I haven't. Not yet." A long silence followed. Then Tom continued. "Next Sunday. You'll understand why." Michael stepped beside Emma. "There won't be another Sunday if we make the wrong choice today." Emma turned. "What choice?" Michael looked toward the magnetic tape in her hand. "You have the key." He held up the sealed cassette. "I have the recording." The two were separated for one reason. Emma already knew the answer, so nobody could hear the ending. Michael nodded. "Because the ending tells the next keeper what to do." Walter looked between them. "Keeper?" Michael's expression softened. "The person who stays, so everyone else can leave." The cottage became silent. Emma slowly lowered her eyes to the tape in her hand. For the first time, she understood what had been waiting for her all along. This story had never been about finding a missing person. It had been about finding the next person willing to remember. Outside, the pale blue light narrowed again. Helen raised her hand one final time. We don't have much longer, and for the first time since arriving at Ashcroft Cemetery, Emma realized the greatest mystery wasn't who had disappeared. It was who would choose to stay. The Keeper's Rule. Emma looked at the magnetic tape resting in her palm. Only a few inches of it remained intact, yet every person in the room seemed willing to risk everything for it. She looked at Michael. You've been trying to stop me from playing it. Michael nodded. Yes, but you also said the recording tells the next keeper what to do. Yes. Emma frowned. So which is it? Michael looked toward the shrinking doorway. Both. Walter stepped closer. I don't understand, Michael answered quietly. The recording doesn't force anyone, it explains the cost. Silence. No one who hears the entire message ever makes the same choice. Emma noticed something in his voice. Regret, not fear. Regret. You heard it. Michael closed his eyes. Every word. And I ignored the ending. Tom spoke from beyond the wall. Michael wanted to save everyone. A pause. He didn't understand that wasn't possible. Michael lowered his head. I thought there had to be another way. There wasn't. Tom answered gently. I learned that before you did. Emma suddenly remembered something. The first lie. Everyone looked at her. The typewriter. It said the first lie was that there were 3 doors. Tom replied immediately. It was. Emma frowned. Then what was the truth? The doors were never important. Silence. They're only thresholds. The real system has 3 keepers. Walter slowly whispered. Helen, Tom, and Michael. Tom answered, exactly. Emma's heartbeat quickened. So, the 3rd door was actually the 3rd keeper. No one corrected her, because she was right. The mystery had never been about architecture. It had always been about people. The woman in the blue coat smiled for the first time in hours. You finally stopped looking at the walls. Emma looked at her. What do you mean? You've been searching for hidden rooms. She gently touched the old photograph of Tom. But the hidden place was always inside the people who remembered. Jonathan suddenly interrupted. Wait. Everyone turned. If there are only 3 keepers, why is Michael here? Tom answered before anyone else could. Because I'm dying. The words struck the room like thunder. Walter stared toward the opening. What? I've held the memories for 23 years. My time is ending. Emma instinctively stepped closer to the wall. You don't sound like you're dying. Tom laughed softly. That's because time isn't passing for me. It stopped. Emma frowned. Then how can you die? Another pause. I don't. I disappear. Nobody spoke. The distinction mattered. Death left a body, a history, a grave. Disappearing left nothing. Tom continued, when the last memory fades. So does the keeper, Michael quietly added. And when that happens, every preserved memory disappears with him. Emma suddenly understood why Michael had returned, not to rescue Tom, to rescue the memories Tom had been carrying. Helen looked toward Emma across the narrowing opening. I carried them for 12 years. She smiled gently at Tom. He carried them for 23. Walter whispered, Why? Tom answered simply, Because someone had to remember your brother. Walter closed his eyes. Tears rolled silently down his face. For 23 years, Tom had remained behind, so Walter could continue living without losing himself completely. The hidden opening narrowed again. Only a thin strip of blue remained. Michael checked his frozen watch, then quietly said, We're almost out of time. Emma looked toward him. What happens when it closes? Michael answered without hesitation. The choice waits another 23 years. Silence. And Tom? Emma asked. Michael couldn't answer. He didn't need to. Tom answered for him. I won't still be here. The room fell completely silent. Then, for the first time all day, the old Underwood typewriter struck a single key. Click. One final line appeared on the page. Only one memory has never been passed on. Emma slowly read it aloud. Walter looked toward the hidden wall. Tom didn't speak. Instead, a small wooden box slowly slid through the narrowing opening, stopping exactly at Emma's feet. The last memory. Nobody reached for the wooden box. It rested on the worn floorboards between Emma and the narrowing opening. Old oak, brass corners. No lock, only a single word carved into the lid. Remember. Tom finally spoke. Open it. Emma knelt carefully. The wood felt strangely warm, as though someone had been holding it only moments before. She lifted the lid. Inside, there wasn't a photograph, no diary, no cassette, only one folded envelope. Its paper had yellowed with age. Across the front, in handwriting Emma immediately recognized. It read, "For the person who chooses to stay." Emma looked toward Tom. I haven't chosen, I know. Tom's voice remained calm. But now you know what the choice really is. Walter stepped beside her. Can anyone read it? Tom answered, anyone can, but only one person will understand it. Emma unfolded the letter. The ink had faded, yet every word remained perfectly clear. She began reading aloud. If you're holding this, then I failed to find another way. For years I believed memories lived inside places. Then I believed they lived inside objects. I was wrong. They live inside people. When nobody remembers someone, they disappear twice. Once from the world, once from every heart. The keeper's task is not to guard a door, it is to refuse that second disappearance. Emma lowered the page. Nobody spoke. The room itself seemed quieter, not because of the words, because everyone understood them. Walter whispered, so all these years? Tom answered softly, I wasn't guarding history, I was guarding people. Helen smiled from the shoreline. That's why I stayed first. Walter looked at her. You carried everyone. Helen nodded. As long as one person remembers. No life is ever completely lost. Emma looked back at the letter. There was another page folded beneath it. Smaller, newer, different handwriting. Not Tom's. She unfolded it. Only 3 short sentences had been written. If you're reading this, Tom finally trusted you. Don't replace him. Free him. Emma frowned. Who wrote this? Michael's face lost all color. I know that handwriting. Everyone looked at him. He whispered only one name, Helen. Walter turned toward the shoreline. You wrote this? Helen slowly nodded. Long before Tom would listen. Michael took one careful step toward Emma. The office never knew that Paige existed. Emma looked at him. What does it mean? Michael answered without hesitation. It changes everything. Silence. We thought every cycle needed another keeper. He looked toward the narrowing opening. But Helen is saying, it doesn't. Walter stared at the letter. Then why has Tom stayed all these years? Nobody answered. Not even Tom. After several long seconds, he finally laughed. A tired laugh. I suppose, because I never learned how to let go. The words struck Walter harder than anything else. 23 years. Not because Tom had to remain, because he couldn't forgive himself for leaving his brother behind. The sacrifice had become a prison of his own making. Emma slowly folded the letters. Then she looked directly toward the opening. Tom. Yes? If nobody has to replace you, then how do we free you? For the first time. Tom didn't answer immediately. Instead, the sea breeze beyond the doorway grew stronger. Helen closed her eyes. Michael gripped the frozen pocket watch. Walter held his breath. Finally, Tom spoke. Very quietly, "You tell the truth." Emma frowned. "What truth?" Tom answered with a calmness that filled the entire cottage. The one story that was erased before anyone could remember it. At that exact moment, the old typewriter struck its keys by itself. Not one, not two. An entire sentence. Emma turned toward the page. Every person in the room read the words together. The first name ever added to the monument was never a victim. The first name. No one moved. The sentence on the typewriter seemed almost too simple. The first name ever added to the monument was never a victim. Emma read it again. Slowly, each word carried more weight than the last. Walter broke the silence. If the first name wasn't a victim, then who was it? Tom answered at once. The builder. Emma frowned. The person who built the monument. Yes, the person who understood memory better than anyone else. Michael slowly whispered Bounder. Tom corrected him. No. Volunteer. Emma looked at the black monument through the cottage window. All this time, she had assumed the names engraved there belonged to people who disappeared. Now, that assumption had collapsed. The monument, she said quietly, isn't a list of the missing. Tom replied. It never was. Walter looked toward the opening. Then what is it? Tom answered with absolute certainty. It's a promise. Silence. When someone accepts the burden of protecting another person's memories, their name is added. Emma felt a chill. So Helen's name wasn't carved because she vanished. Helen smiled gently from the shoreline. It was carved because I chose. Michael looked at the monument through the window. I spent 11 years believing those names marked losses. Tom sighed. So did the office. They watched the monument. They never understood it. Emma's eyes widened. Then all these years, the office wasn't protecting the system. They were misunderstanding it. Michael nodded. Exactly. We turned volunteers into prisoners. The words hung heavily inside the cottage. 23 years of fear, built upon one wrong assumption. Walter looked toward Tom. You stayed because you believed someone had to replace you. Tom smiled sadly. I did. Walter slowly raised the second page Helen had written. But Helen discovered the truth. Tom nodded. Years ago. So, why didn't you leave? A long silence followed. Finally, Tom answered with complete honesty. Because I was afraid that everyone would forget me. No one spoke. It wasn't duty. It wasn't sacrifice. It was the oldest human fear of all. Being forgotten. Emma folded the letter carefully. Then she looked directly toward the narrowing opening. I won't let that happen. Tom looked at her. You don't even know me. Emma smiled faintly. I know enough. You stayed behind so your brother could live a normal life. You protected memories that weren't even your own. She held up the envelope. And now your story exists. As long as it's told, you're remembered. Helen closed her eyes. A single tear rolled down her face. For the first time in 23 years. Someone had finally understood. The opening began to tremble. Not because it was collapsing, because something was changing. The pale blue light softened. The shoreline beyond became brighter. Tom laughed quietly. I've been waiting a long time to hear someone say that. Walter stepped toward the opening. Tom, his brother answered. Yes, I remember. Only 2 words. Nothing more. But they were enough. The beach behind Tom began dissolving into warm sunlight. Not disappearing, becoming whole. Helen smiled. Michael lowered his frozen watch. For the first time. The second hand moved. 1 tick. Then another. Time had started again. Tom looked toward Emma one final time. The messages? Emma nodded. I'll send them. You finally understand why. I do. She smiled. Not to change the past. To make sure we survive it. Tom smiled back. Then his figure slowly faded into the morning light. Not erased. Not lost. Simply released. The opening closed without a sound. The hidden wall became an ordinary wooden wall once more. The compass in Emma's hand stopped moving forever. Its needle pointed north. Just north. Nothing else. 1 week later, on Sunday morning, Emma returned alone to Ashcroft Cemetery. She walked to the black monument. Every engraved name remained exactly where it had always been. Nothing new had appeared. She smiled. Then she removed a folded note from her pocket. She placed it beneath a single white lily. The note contained only 6 words. No one is forgotten anymore. As she turned to leave, her phone vibrated. A scheduled message had just been sent. To herself. Watch the stone, not the gate. Emma smiled without opening it. She already remembered writing it. And for the first time, the cemetery felt exactly what it had always been meant to become. Not a place where people disappeared. A place where they were remembered. Epilogue 1 year later, Ashcroft Cemetery looked ordinary again. Fresh-cut grass, morning mist, birds settling on weathered headstones. Nothing suggested that history itself had nearly unraveled there. Visitors came. They left flowers. They mourned. They went home. None of them ever noticed the black monument. Not because it was hidden. Because, somehow, their eyes simply passed over it, as if it had become part of the landscape, exactly as it had always intended. Emma Carter no longer worked as an investigative journalist. Her final article had never been published. Editors claimed there wasn't enough evidence, no official records, no witnesses willing to speak publicly. No proof. She never argued. Some stories were never meant for newspapers. She wrote them anyway, just differently. Every Sunday morning, she walked through Ashcroft Cemetery, carrying a single white lily. She placed it beneath the monument. Never more than 1, never less. Then she quietly read every engraved name aloud, not because the monument required it, because someone deserved to hear them. Every week, without fail. Walter Grayson came less often now. Age had finally begun catching up with him, but something inside him had grown lighter. He laughed more. He slept through the night. Sometimes he would stop beside Emma and smile. I dreamed about Tom. Emma would ask, "What happened?" Walter always answered the same way. We were boys again. And this time, I remembered the whole day. Michael Sullivan disappeared. Officially, no one ever found him. Unofficially, Emma sometimes noticed fresh footprints near the old caretaker's cottage after heavy rain. One set, always leading away, never toward it. She never followed. She understood. Some people protected the world best, by remaining unseen. The woman in the blue coat was never seen again. Months later, workers demolished the abandoned caretaker's cottage after a winter storm. Inside, they found nothing unusual. No hidden wall, no machinery, no doorway. Only an old underwood typewriter sitting beneath years of dust. Its ribbon had long since dried. The workers threw it away. None of them noticed a single fresh sheet of paper still resting in the carriage. Blank, except for one line. Someone else would eventually find it. On the first Sunday of October, exactly 1 year after Emma's name had appeared on the monument. She returned before sunrise. The cemetery was silent. She placed her white lily beneath the polished stone, then looked up. For the first time, every engraved name reflected the morning light. Clearly, peacefully. No new names had been added. None had disappeared. The monument's work was finally finished. Emma smiled, then turned to leave. Halfway down the path, she heard footsteps behind her. Not hurried, not threatening, simply familiar. She looked back. No one stood there, only the breeze moving through the trees. She smiled anyway. Morning, Tom. The wind stirred the lilies. Nothing more, nothing less. That was enough. Years later. Visitors to Ashcroft Cemetery would occasionally ask an odd question. Who keeps leaving fresh white lilies at the old monument every Sunday? No caretaker knew. No camera ever captured anyone. Some believed it was an old family tradition. Others thought it was simply habit. Emma never corrected them, because the truth was wonderfully ordinary. People are never truly lost, as long as someone remembers their name. And every Sunday morning, somewhere, someone still did.